Tripp, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Dad Edge podcast, my friend.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate it.
Yes, I appreciate you coming on because I just got one question for you, man.
Let's do it.
By the end of this interview, am I going to be dangerous?
You know what? We could go there. We could actually, we could have a dangerous conversation. We could talk about what it would be dangerous in your life. We could go down that road.
Oh, I would love it. You gonna put me on the spot?
If you want.
I can be put on the spot. That'd be fun. Yeah. Hey, before you put me on the spot, let me put you on the spot. So I'm always so intrigued with guys who come on Dad Edge because the guys who are really doing like these big things in the world, I'm always so curious about what your childhood was like. Like even the relationship with your own father. What was that like for you growing up?
You mentioned like what the guys that are doing big things. The first thing I thought was we're all pretty damaged. We're all pretty wounded, and there's a lot of us that are overcoming a lot of those wounds by being and doing big stuff in the world. So that was my first thought. It was that it's really common that behind that facade of this guy that's got it all together and he's on top of some mountain is this pretty hurt little boy inside. So I see that a lot. Doesn't mean they're crippled. Doesn't mean that they're unable to do stuff. But that is a big part of it. I don't think it's necessary to become successful or to be a big deal in the world, but that's usually a lot of times. Unfortunately, I see a lot of guys, and you look at them, you're like, man, that guy's got all. He must be so happy. He must be so fulfilled. And then I see on the other side of the curtain that he's wrestling with that part of himself that never feels like he's enough. So anyway, that was the first thing that popped in my mind in a split second. I see a lot of unhappy guys, unfortunately, there. So, but what was your original question there?
Yeah. So what was your childhood like? I mean, do you have some wounds of some sort that is causing you to do the work that you're doing today?
Well, I don't know if it's causing me to do the work. I originally got into coaching. This was a few years after I'd gone through a big awakening. When I was 13, my mother took her own life. And so I didn't deal with any of the grief. I didn't deal with we didn't talk about it necessarily. I didn't want to talk about it. It was all that I knew and all that I had. So it became a normal thing for me to kind of go through that and just act like it was in the rearview mirror. And I never dealt with it. Fast forward into my 20s a bit, and my life is just rigid and drained. And I'm avoiding conversations so I don't have to have to feel anything in my life. My relationships were crap. I was in a box about things. Because I didn't want to be vulnerable. I was afraid to be hurt again. And this was all really behind the curtain. Like I didn't realize that this is what was going on at the time. So anyway, went through a big, I don't know what you would call it, awakening for lack of a better term. Basically, I was a house of cards and it all came down. Went through a big emotional, upheaval, lost like 30 pounds. Just basically had my interpretation of the world, my whole worldview just got shattered. And when I started to come out of it, I was like, what the hell just happened? What did I just go through? But I felt renewed. Like I just went through the thing I was afraid to go through. I went through this part that I thought would kill me if I actually had to feel all of that stuff. And it didn't kill me. I actually feel stronger as a result. I felt more of myself. I felt more whole and more complete. And so that lit a fire under me. I got really curious and then just became this voracious reader, started going on meditation retreats and studying all kinds of philosophy and mysticism and all of that kind of stuff, and just wanting to understand what that was all about. And then I think the thread in all of that was that starting to see other men living in a box in some way themselves, whether it was from grief or wound or just that's just all they knew. A lot of us are just grow up. Okay, you're going to go to this grade. You're going to go to this school. You're going to get this degree. You're going to get this job. You're going to get the family, the house, and never really coming to terms or asking themselves, what the hell is it that I really want? They never developed that sense of inner autonomy or authority, that I call it. So that became an exciting conversation for me. It was finding the men that wanted to have that conversation. And then number two, not just read books about it, but do something about it. Actually get into that conversation and then say, okay, well, what are you going to do differently in your life this week? What are you going to do differently in your life this year? What are we creating here? And I just, that became the coaching process for me. That's the context for how I work with men, is more of that. What are we creating in your life? We don't know how long you're going to be here. 6 hours, 6 weeks, 6 months, 60 years, whatever it might be. What are we really here to do? And are we aligned with that? Or are we waiting? Are we waiting for permission to go for what we really want? So,
can you give us some context around what it is that you went through?
Which part?
So the part where it sounds like with some of the things that you described was there was an awakening of some sort, but it also maybe came from a moment where you maybe drew a line in the sand, or maybe even a bit of a breakdown. Am I being accurate, or am I completely off?
No, you're on it. What happened was I was living with a girlfriend at the time, and I'd actually started to see a therapist, but the therapy that I was in was really intellectual, and I wasn't in touch with any kind of emotional stuff. And I don't think that was the therapist's fault necessarily. I just think I was so walled off and didn't know any different. And the girl that I was seeing at the time and living with, she decided, that she wanted to do something different with her life, and she was going to move to a different part of the world and pursue her career. And that was the only places she could really do it. And I was totally on board and supported her in that. What I didn't see was that it was going to pull the rug out from under me and trigger whatever wounds and abandonment kind of stuff that I had. So I just wasn't aware that was going to happen. So it took me, I felt the heartbreak of her leaving, but then after a while I was like, what is going on? I can't leave the house. Like, this isn't really about losing her. This is something else. And so then it became, I'm actually grieving. I'm finally grieving the loss of my mother. And I'm finally coming to terms with all of that stuff, all the stuff that I didn't want to feel for years.
So do you think it really just boiled down to maybe these abandonment issues that you just never really dealt with?
I'm sure. I think there was just a lot of grief, just a lot of pain. There's just being heartbroken, for lack of a better term.
I don't want to go any further in the interview and not just really acknowledge, how traumatic that must have been for you as a kid. I mean, like you even said, you didn't deal with it. Your family sounds like they really didn't talk about it. And it was probably something that just was stuffed down over and over and over. And those things over time, they just boil up, especially with a parent. With a parent, I feel like no matter if it's, loss of life, or they left, or maybe even they were physically there, emotionally just completely on autopilot, not even there for you. But sometimes we have to deal with like these wounds, and sometimes these wounds are so traumatic that it's almost like they don't even pop up until later. And it's like, oh, whoa, that's there. It's been there. I've chosen to not really deal with it, maybe ignore it a little bit because, there's a lot of other things going on and that kind of thing. As you reflect on just the loss of your mom, like how's it sitting with you now?
It was such a long time ago, and I processed it and worked through it. The way that it shows up in my life now is when I fear losing my wife or my daughter. That's how I'm aware that there's still any kind of, stuff that's left over from it. So they get in the car and go to the grocery store. My nervous system's on high alert. Like, okay, they may not come back, kind of thing. They may get in a car wreck, whatever it might be, right? They're traveling this week right now. And I notice it. There's just a little bit more of a thing. And so when I talk about it with my wife, who's a trained psychotherapist, she kind of jokes with me. She's like, that's not really normal. We can just go to the grocery store and you can be fine. I was like, oh, really? Huh. I just kind of figured everybody was a little wigged out about these things, but it's a form of post-traumatic stress. And right. I've worked with that, when these things pop up and it's like, well, I can continue to bury it and use energy to press it down and to manage this. Or I can maybe free up that energy so I can be more creative and I don't have to, it's like I can reclaim that energy and put that power towards something else. And so I think I worked with this with a person. It was about 1.5 years or 2 years ago that I was like, you know what, I'm just tired. Would it be possible? Let's see if I can work with this thing and calm my nervous system around this, so that it's not something I'm managing as I'm coaching somebody. Then in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I wonder if they're okay. Are they okay? Are they kept? So.
Have you, and last, you just had me so intrigued with what you're talking about here. And of course we'll get to your book and everything, but do you help men through traumatic events themselves? So PTSD and just things like that?
I don't. That's outside of the scope of my work and my expertise, even though I have a lot of experience there. And I've certainly been with men as they go through their pain. It's just not my area. There's people that work with that a lot better. And so I will, if we get to a place in our coaching where what's holding them back, if you think about coaching in the sense of, let's say we're talking about an athlete. So an athlete is in the game of his life and he wants to perform at his highest level. He wants to have all of his energy and all of his resources to be able to perform at the highest level. So he can do whatever. Well, if he's injured, he busts his knee, we got to rehab that thing. We got to put some time and energy in it so that he can get back in the game and do as well as he can. The fact is we're all dinged up. We've just gone through life. It doesn't matter what my story is or your story, or we've all got these types of things. We took some shots in life because that's just what we do. It's a messy existence. So if those things are getting in the way of our work, and usually it shows up with, hey, what do you say we take this next step this week? You have this, reach out and have this conversation with your wife, or you reach out and make XYZ happen, and they keep dragging heels. They keep, they're not willing to go down that road. We might take a look at if there's something in his past that's creating a story that what he's about to do is way more dangerous or risky than it really is. And so that might be where I would say, hey, I think it'd be a great idea for you to talk to a professional at this point and at least just rule it out. At least just so we know that it's not what's really in the way. And if it is the thing in the way, let's think of all the energy and the creativity that you're going to recoup as a result of doing that work.
Very cool. Well, I'm excited to talk about this, your new book, which is, you can't help it. But just look at the title and be like, very, very intrigued. And the title is "This Book Will Make You Dangerous: The Irreverent Guide for Men Who Refuse to Settle." And so tell us about this book. First of all, what inspired the book?
What inspired the book was somebody came to me, a publisher, and was like, you got to write a book. And I was like, I'm not going to write a book. I throw most books that I get in the trash. I get a lot of books. I'm a podcast host, so I get all these books, and most of them just go in the trash. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but most of those books are trying to help us win a game that we can't win. They're having us chase this false hope that if we just have enough X or Y or Z, then we're going to be set for life. We're going to be fine once and for all. And I'm not part of that game. I don't subscribe to that mentality. So I don't want to peddle that false hope. And so he was like, well, then what's if you throw all those books in the trash, then what's the book that you would write? Or what's the book that you would keep? And I was like, that set the hook. So I thought to myself, well, what's the book that I wish I could have read when I was just starting out into this personal growth area? Because there's a lot of books that are in this domain. Not many of them are for men, but the ones that are for men tend to be more in the new age kind of way. They don't speak to a lot of the guys that I talk to, which are the guys up the street from you, And so I was like, well, if I can reach that guy and he's right on the cusp of stepping into this next phase of his life, but he's just not sure what to do or how to think about it or how to approach it, because most of the guys in his life are sleepwalking. They're zombies. They're settling. But here's this one guy out of 10 that's like, you know what? I've had enough of this, but I'm just not quite sure what's next. That's the guy that I wanted to reach. That was me, 20 plus years ago. So I set out to write that book. So it's funny. It's full of some disgusting jokes and stories and anecdotes. And my aim was to make it as entertaining and also really have a lot of depth and value. And so the guy walks away from it really having a sense of, okay, this is what I stand for and this is what I'm doing in my lifetime. And I'm going to have a ton of fun in the process.
I think especially for men, and I know this book is not just for men, it's for women too, but
correct.
I know that it's a good thing to grab a man's attention through a little bit of humor and through fun, because I think that's where we really come together. But the whole title really captures me too. So what does it mean to be dangerous?
Let's consider that how our brains just work for a second. So we've got a brain that is designed to help us survive first and foremost. We're living in an age now where we're not really in danger a lot. We're not really in mortal danger a lot. We don't have things that are hunting us down, trying to take away our food. A lot of the things that our brain was designed to keep an eye on, those threats no longer exist. The brain doesn't know this. It's just simply adapted to find new threats. And so what I see holding most guys back is a fear of being uncomfortable. They don't want to deal with their emotions. Like I just talked about a little while ago. It's like, I don't want to feel sad. I don't want to feel afraid. They don't want to feel physically uncomfortable. They don't want to put themselves, well, if I'm used to living in 4,000 square feet, I don't want to live in 1,000 square feet. Number two is they don't want to do anything that feels risky. Well, what's risky these days? What's anything that jeopardizes their money? It's anything that jeopardizes their time or their energy. And then number three, and this is the biggest one, is that they don't want to do anything that jeopardizes their self-image. As men, we're really committed to making sure that we don't look weak. We got to have our stuff together. We're very sensitive. We don't like to admit it, but we're really sensitive about how we're perceived by others. And so a lot of our life can end up being a giant pissing match to make sure that we prove that we're not that scared little kid we were when we were growing up. So the car we drive, the house we live in, the job titles, all this kind of stuff, so much of what we're doing is we're in this perpetual state of proving I'm enough, I'm enough, I'm a man, I'm enough, I'm strong. Those aren't real threats to our life. But we've convinced ourselves that we will not be safe unless we have those things. And so my idea is that if you're going to go through life playing it safe, always seeking comfort, always seeking this sense of certainty and safety, always seeking this sense of importance and status, your life's not going to be happy. Those three things don't deliver happiness. They deliver relief. They deliver a sense of, okay, I'm okay for today. Nothing came and hunted me down this afternoon. But they don't equal fulfillment. They don't satisfy that part of us that is here to evolve and self-actualize. They don't satisfy that part of us that says, I'm here to feel free. I'm here to feel alive. I'm here to love the people that I care about fully. I'm here to experience peace of mind. And so when I talk to guys and they say, man, I'm struggling to do something with purpose. I'm struggling to do something with meaning. I'm so bored out of my mind, even though I've got everything that I could ever have imagined that I wanted. And we look at what they're doing. They've aligned their lives to always be comfortable, to always be safe, and to always look good. In other words, they're playing it safe. And so when I say, hey, what would happen if you were willing to be just a little bit dangerous in these areas? If you're willing to step into those places just a little bit, we may find the freedom, the aliveness, the love, and the peace of mind that you're ultimately looking for.
So just a couple of reflections on that. I definitely understand. Like I was nodding my head for those of you guys who can't see us on YouTube, nodding my head when you were like, yeah, the car, and yes, the house, and yes, the job title, and men we're proficient at that stuff. Those are the things that we really, really seek. But you're right. And there's a lot of miserable men out there. And you started to really go down that road of, hey, these are the things that keep me quote unquote safe. Like, here's my money, here's my image, here's my job, here's my car, here's my house. Like, yet we come home and we're like, why am I not that happy? I don't really understand. And why is it that men, as you put it, men become grumpy, soft, and we forget to have fun?
I had a conversation with a guy this morning, and I was like, when's the last time you hung out with your buddies? Oh, it's been years. Okay. When was the last time you went and did XYZ that you did when you were a younger man? Oh, since I was a younger man, haven't done it. What have you been focusing on? My business. there's this idea that if we just take care of our business and we just take care of our families, that will somehow, there's an expectation. If I just do those things, then I'm going to feel good. I'm going to feel alive. Not just good, I mean alive. I'm going to feel engaged. And what we find is that, hey, I got really good at taking care of my responsibilities, but I'm feeling kind of trapped. I feel drained by doing it. I feel a little bored, or I'm in this state of constant overwhelm because I'm trying to carry 6 gallons in a 5-gallon bucket no matter what. So I think it's helpful to just come back and say, what is it that when we understand what we're really playing for, which are these experiences of freedom, aliveness, love, and peace, and we start to realize that just taking care of the business or just taking care of family is not going to be the thing that fulfills us alone. They're important, but they're not it. And so we can't expect that if we just do that well, that we're going to ultimately feel fine. But that's not what we see. I mean, it's kind of part of this whole American dream idea is that you just do those things really well, you're set. You're going to be fine. And I make fun of this in the very opening of my book, where I talk about going to the doctor and he sticks his finger in my rear end and he's really surprised to find what he finds. And it's like, well, why would he be surprised? What would he expect to find if he stuck his finger up there? But yet that's what a lot of us are coming up against, is that as we go through life, we're expecting to find something different when we check these boxes. And we end up in a place where we're like, well, what the hell's this shit? And that's the frustrating part.
I think every answer that I've ever heard, and I used to do this a lot and I don't do it anymore. Everything is good and fine and fun and good. Hey man, how's life? Good. How's work? Fine. How's the family? We're good. We're good. Busy. I hate that word, by the way, busy. That drives me crazy now, man. I just did a podcast not too long ago on busy as a 4-letter word. You know, it's like, because when I hear a guy say busy, I think about the wash, rinse, repeat cycle of life, like Groundhog Day. Like every day is the day that like it was before, you know, and they're not really living, like you said, these fulfilling lives, these maybe riskier lives, these where they're actually, like, to quote a movie, I can't remember what Robin Williams said, suck the marrow out of life in Dead Poets Society. If you remember that movie, I don't know how old you are, but I'm kind of aging myself. But how is it that a man's listening to us right now and he's like, gosh, you know what, Tripp, Larry, like I'm sitting here thinking like, yeah, that's me. I'm in this wash, rinse, repeat cycle and I'm chasing these things. Like I'm chasing the titles, I'm chasing the money, and I got a nice 401k and I've got a decent home, and, you know, the wife is kind of happy, but yet, yeah, like I can't remember the last time I went out with my friends. I can't remember the last time I did something for myself. And there's usually like this huge guilt factor that we feel if we do something for ourselves. But going back to fulfillment, joy, and maybe even living a bit dangerous, what is one simple thing that a man who's listening to us right now can just go do and start that element of fulfillment in his life?
Get curious. What do I mean? When you come in contact with, gosh, I wish I could, fill in the blank, right? Put a boys trip together. Let's go away for the weekend. I wish I could XYZ. A lot of us have just lost touch with even I want. We don't even ask ourselves what we want anymore. It's always, what should I do? What does my wife want me to do? What does my job expect me to do? We've fallen into these just following expectations. If you were to get in touch with, okay, well, if I'm tired of feeling trapped, what would have me feel free? I'm tired of feeling drained, what would have me feel alive? I'm tired of feeling disconnected and isolated, especially from my buddies, what would have me feel more connected to them? If I'm tired of feeling bored or I'm tired of feeling overwhelmed, what would give me peace of mind? You get specific about those areas. Even if you just say, I'm tired of feeling trapped. Okay, well, I can look at my schedule. What is it about my schedule that has me feeling trapped? There may not be any space in here for me to go do something for myself. I've got an expectation that I always have to, if I've got any time away from work, it has to be with family or whatever that might be. So I would just say, well, let's get curious. What are the things, what's the expectations you quote have to do or else? There's a big or else. And so, well, I have to do my schedule this way or else. And I'm saying, or else what? And this is where we essentially, like with our kids, we get that flashlight. It's like, let's go look under the bed and let's see if there's really a monster under the bed. Because I don't know about you, when my daughter came to me and said there was a monster in the closet, I didn't believe her, but hey, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. This could be the time. This could be the day that there was a monster in the bed. But let's go take a look. Because no matter what I say to her, she's not going to believe me until we go look. And so I do this with my clients. We grab the flashlight and say, let's see if there's really a monster under your bed. So your schedule has to be this jam-packed. You have to, quote, always be busy, or else what? And we start to come up against his scripts, his narratives, the things that he's reacting to, whether he knows it or not. Most of the time, he's not even conscious to it. Well, if I don't do this, it might be uncomfortable. My wife might get kind of mad at me. She might say something. She might get mad. I don't know. Okay. All right. So your wife might get a little mad at you. All right. Well, what about this? Well, I don't want to waste, go do that thing. I don't know. That's a lot of money. Yeah. $50. That's a lot of money. Yeah. It's a lot. Okay. Right. You make how much a year? Oh, yeah, okay, it's not that much money. Okay, great. Well, and then what about that? Well, what are my friends going to say to me if they find out I do X? They're going to think I'm a wuss. They're going to think I'm such a weirdo. Okay, great. And so are you a wuss? I mean, you're kind of being a wuss right now because you're worried about what you can kind of play with them in that way. So it's like you start to put these things on the table in front of you. You start to realize like, that's what's having me feel afraid all the time. These are the things I'm running away from. This is the stuff that my primitive brain has convinced me will kill me if I'm not always comfortable or safe or accepted. And so as a coach, I would just say, let's find one of these things and let's go up against it. You're scared your wife's going to be mad at you if you go do XYZ. Let's talk to her. Let's check out that story. I have a story that if I go do XYZ this weekend, you're going to go through the roof, file for divorce, whatever, withhold sex for a year, whatever that thing might be. Is that true? No, it's not true. In fact, I'd love for you to get out of the house. You're a pain in the ass when you're grumpy, and we'd love it if you were more, energetic and happy. Oh, wow. That's actually what happens a lot of the time. So it's just going and checking these things out, shining the light, and then holding them accountable. Go do this stuff. And it'll be uncomfortable. It'll feel a little risky. You're not quite sure how you're going to be perceived because it's stretching you outside of that comfort zone. But that's essentially what it would look like, this process, day after day, week after week, month after month. And this is how we step into that fulfillment and that joy that you spoke of earlier.
Man, I love this. Do you have, obviously names excluded, but do you have a real life story that you could really hit this example home with?
I think it's helpful to consider that most of the time when we fixate on an outcome, we sell ourselves short. So in the book, I talk about this time I was talking to a client of mine, and he was going to get married, and he was scared to get married. Obviously, he's a little apprehensive. Makes sense. And so when I said, what are you afraid of? And he says, I'm afraid I'm never going to be able to have sexual experiences with other women ever again. Okay. And what's the big deal? He's like, it's just going to drive me nuts. I'm never going to be able to have sex with these women again. He's like, I was in a coffee shop this morning. I saw this beautiful woman, and immediately I just started getting pissed off. Oh, I needed to have sex with this woman. I'm never going to have sex with this woman. He just went through this whole tirade. It was really, really throwing him for a loop. Okay, got it. So in your ideal world, what would be the thing that you need? A harem. That's what I need. He came up with a harem, which I thought was kind of wild. Sounded like a huge pain in the ass to me, but he wanted a harem. And in his mind, he's like, there's just no way I can talk to my fiance about having a harem. I really don't think she's going to go for a harem. And he
can I ask a really dumb question?
Yeah.
What's a harem?
A harem is a term for having like a group of women that are at your disposal for sex.
I'm naive I did not know this. So this is a true story?
This is a true story.
Oh my gosh. All right. Now you got me on the hook, man.
Okay. So he's convinced that the only way he would like the ultimate, he's reached the summit is if he had a harem. He had this group of women that were always available on call so that he could have sex. He could have these experiences with these women, which, could be kind of fun, but also sounds like a huge pain in the butt. So I said, well, what do you imagine would feel good about having that much sex in your life with these different women? What is it? And what we were able to find out was that for him, it was just exciting. And it was what had him feel alive. It was the anticipation and the wonder and the novelty and not knowing what was going to be next. And for him, marriage was going to be the opposite. It was knowing exactly what was going to happen day after day. If you were going to have sex with your partner, you even knew what positions you were going to be in, how long it was basically going to last, and where it was going to be. If you got kids in the house, you're going to work it out so the kids don't catch you, all of that kind of stuff. And he was just like, that sounded like death to him. But the point being is that we realized that what he wanted ultimately was freedom and aliveness, that he was afraid that getting into a marriage meant that he was going to be trapped and he was going to be drained and it was going to suck. And so I said, do you think your fiance is going into this marriage excited to be trapped and drained too? Like that's what she wants? Do you think she wants to be trapped and drained? Or do you think that she cares about freedom and aliveness too? And he started to realize that that was a universal desire, that they probably wanted those things. They just probably had different ideas about how to get there. But I said, what if it wasn't really about the harem, but the harem to you represents this freedom and aliveness? What if you were to sit down with your wife and say, hey, I want to get married to you. I know I love you. I want to create my life with you. And I also am concerned that I want to make sure that we continue to cultivate our sense of freedom and aliveness. What about you? Can we be partners in that? And he's like, I could totally have that conversation. I could totally go to her and talk to her about that. And so it's wonderful to start to realize that some of the things that we fixate on, the car, the house, the income, once my business is here, once I get this many followers or whatever, that when we understand that we're ultimately playing for the experience, we can relax and start to realize there's lots of different avenues to have those experiences in our life. And we start to see that, man, I'm a lot closer to what I ultimately want. I don't have to wait 5, 10, 20 years to accomplish this huge goal.
Whew. I got to learn a new word today.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
That is a good one. I'm going to go to my wife and just ask her about a harem. See what she says. She's going to look at me like I have two heads too. She's like, what is that? So that
let her find it in your search history, and that'll be a good
Just go ahead and Google it. See what it says.
Just Google it. Yeah, just Google a lot. Yeah, Google it a lot.
Right. So what was the outcome of this guy? Now you got me so curious. What was the outcome? What did he do?
Had the conversation. Well, first, just right off the bat, realizing that it wasn't about the harem, just had him calm down. He didn't feel trapped anymore. He didn't feel like he was on tied to the tracks and the train was coming right at him. He realized that he was back in control. He could steer this thing. He could talk about it. And that as long as he wasn't fixating on this one particular thing, that there were going to be a lot of avenues. So right off the bat, peace of mind. And then another part where that felt good for him was like, I'm actually with the right person because she does like those things. Like that's part of one of the reasons why we love each other is that we like to have fun experiences together and we do value freedom and aliveness. So it had him relax there. A lot of the doubts went down. And so having this conversation with her, 90% of the concern was already addressed. But I think it was important for him to actually bring this to her so that, it was a shared experience. It was a shared concern.
I mean, if you really boil it down, I mean, 2 of the 6 basic human needs is certainty and uncertainty. So human beings, I mean, we need variety. We want variety, we desire variety, but we also desire certainty as well. So that was probably for him, maybe that uncertainty muscle that he really needed. But it was probably the perception of like, well, uncertainty means a variety of different sexual partners. But I think what you got him to peel back those onion layers quite a bit. And like, is it really about that? Or is it about really having a variety in your life and feeling alive and doing maybe other things that make you come alive versus like sleeping with 5 women at your disposal? Right. So I'm gonna have to remember that one. So what about this? Let's switch gears for a second here. You mentioned three big fears in your book that drive our success, but also make us weak. Does that have anything to do with certainty, uncertainty, not good enough, those types of things?
Yeah, it comes back to that comfort. I'm afraid I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm afraid I'm going to put my money or my time or my energy at risk. That'll have us pump the brakes on something. And then that third one is I'm afraid that I'm going to be rejected, misunderstood, judged negatively. Somebody's going to think I'm a moron, whatever that stuff is. So when guys start to get in touch with what they want, I want to feel more free. I want to feel more alive. I want to go do X, Y, Z in their life. Those are the things that come up. Oh, but I don't know. That's not what I usually do on my Saturday morning. I usually go play golf and I do this. It's like breaking out of their routine. It's uncomfortable. We don't even want to get off the couch to go get a beer out of the fridge, right? So it's just like, it's realizing how rigid we can become with our relationship to comfort and this illusion of safety and always needing to look good.
How can we use death to find new direction in life? You mentioned that as well.
I think death wakes us up. There's a commonality that I see with guys that are doing. I have a very technical term for guys that are kind of circling the toilet drain. It's they're dicking around, and the commonality with those guys is they're not in touch with their mortality. They're not in touch with the one fact that they're going to die. Most definitely, they're going to die one day. So in their mind, they're just in the airport terminal waiting for the plane. They're waiting for this thing to come in. They're waiting for something to show up. And instead of, well, I'm going to die, so I don't need to be freaked out by that. That doesn't need to create a sense of fear or pressure, but I can use it to check myself. Am I in alignment with how I truly want to live? Am I being an ally to myself? Am I going to look back when I'm laying there on the ground after the bus hit me and I'm staring up at the sky and the medics are coming over to take care of me and I'm taking my last breaths? Am I going to be happy with how I've chosen to live? Like, okay, here's the end of the road. Am I okay with that? Am I at peace with that? We may never have that moment where we review our lives in that way, but for me, I think it's a powerful exercise to check ourselves, because most of the time we're waiting. We're waiting for it to be safe. We're waiting for the perfect plan. We're waiting for permission from our wives or permission from the world or permission from our dead parents or whoever to come along. We're waiting for something to come along, give us the green light. So, hey man, you can really start to live now. That's not coming. We have to lean in and start to live that way today. Doesn't mean we got to be reckless or stupid or blow anything up, but we can by little start to align our actions with those deeper values and that deeper desire to be alive.
I love that analogy of waiting for the plane. That one really hits me. We use a lot of terms on the show. One of them is the drift, how we can interrupt the drift. And I can definitely, when you were talking about the airport, and everybody in the airport's on the drift, they're just trying to get to the gate. They're in the zone. They got the wheelie bag. They got their earbuds in. It's like one of the few places I ever see people drinking at like 9 a.m. in the morning, right? Like, just get me out of this reality. This sucks. Yeah. And another quote that we say a lot on the show is, the definition of hell is meeting the man that you could have been when you're laying on your deathbed. And when you said that really, really spoke to me. And the audience is really familiar with me sharing that quote as well. And one thing that I was talking to a friend of mine who's in our community, and he was asking me, he's like, why do you always say that quote? I was like, I say that quote because I think about it every day. And I use it as a gut check. So when my kid comes up to me, or when I'm putting my 6-year-old to bed and I'm exhausted, and he's like, Dad, can we do one more book? And every part of me wants to say no, because I just want to go to bed. But I'm like, if I were to do this, if I say no and I had the opportunity to do this decision over again, what would I say? So if I'm on my deathbed and I have to meet that man, what would that man want to do? And I'm like, absolutely, we can read another book. It's like interrupting that drift and living that good, purposeful life, but having like a benchmark. That's why I love that analogy of the airport. It's like, hey, how do I get out of this airport? Maybe I want to go fly the plane. I don't want to be a passenger in it. Like, I want to go get in that thing, go fly and go live my life. So I really like that. The other thing too, I want to take this in just a bit of a different direction. We're speaking to dads and fathers. When it comes to maybe inspiring our kids to be dangerous, to take risks, to live life, and maybe even reflect on some of the conversations that you've had with your daughter. What types of conversations or examples, or what types of things come to mind that you share with your daughter, or maybe you've even inspired men to share with their sons or daughters?
The biggest lesson I've learned is that, at least with my daughter, talk's pretty cheap. She, the things that she takes away are when she sees me doing things. So I got to be really careful about whether everything's a performance. That's not it. But I know that when I hear what has impacted her, she's usually recalling when she's witnessed me do something, which is a challenging for a lot of us as men these days, because most of the time our work is sitting at a computer, in a room somewhere. It's not really inspiring. So, so the things that I've done with her, like if I want her to take, self-defense course or BJJ, I'm going in too. Like I'm going to be getting thrown around too. If I want her to learn to surf, I'm in the water with her getting tossed around too. Showing her that it's okay. I'm not going to ask her to do things that I wouldn't do. If I want her to perform music, she's going to see me perform music and to do that. So it's like, get out in front, do that stuff, show her that the water's okay. She can come in. It's fine. And I think there's a sense of pride, like, hey, yeah, that's my dad. He's cool. He's doing things, but that's not really it. It's more just, it's doable. It's totally doable. It's fine. Come on in. The water's fine.
Man, I love that. It's like living life with your kids, not like watching them live life. So my boys, like I grew up with this absolutely crazy childhood. I actually didn't even meet my biological father till I was 30. It was by accident. So a lot of the things that I do with my 4 boys, I'm doing for the first time as well. So like I took my boys on a rite of passage retreat, which we hiked up a 14er, a 14,000 foot mountain. And so it was to demonstrate that the top of the mountain was the end of boyhood and the descent was their first steps into being a young man. And so that was cool. But we've done all kinds of things together that I've done for the first time. We've gone to places that I've gone for the first time. The whole reason I have this guitar, you and I were talking about our guitars hanging on my back wall. I'm terrible at that thing because I've only been playing it for like a few months, but I have one son that plays drums, another one that plays saxophone. I drop them off every Tuesday to take music lessons. And one day they were just like, hey, Dad, haven't you ever wanted to learn how to play an instrument? I was like, oh, dude, I'd love to learn how to play guitar. Like I've always wanted to learn how to play guitar. And my 12-year-old looks at me, he goes, well, how about you get off that phone with all the other parents in the waiting room waiting for us and sign up for some lessons? And I'm like, challenge accepted. Let's do this. So now we all 3 play an instrument, but it's a lot of these things, man. We do them for the first time,
Yeah.
And it's cool. I mean, the only thing like firing a gun, first time I fired a gun was learning in class with them. Mm-hmm. And that was cool. But I love that example, man. It's like instead of, and I love the quote, to her, talk is cheap, and just doing. I love that.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, like the point you're making here, I just want to underline is like, this is that part for many guys, which is, what are they going to think of me if I'm a noob? I'm a grown man. I don't want to be a beginner again. I've probably at this stage of my life carved out all the things that I'm uncomfortable doing. And I'm only going to do the things I'm capable of doing. And so to begin again and to suck at something, because that's just like a lot of us have just crafted our lives like, I'm never going to suck at anything again. But what happens if you get over yourself? All right, I'm willing to suck. This 27-year-old guy is going to throw me around like a rag doll for an hour. I'm going to go into this guitar lesson and just make a bunch of noise. It's going to sound terrible. Like it's just that willingness to go through that part too. I think ingrains in them that it's okay to suck, and just that's part of the learning process. You got to start there. You don't start out at the top.
I agree, man. I agree. And I love that example too of BJJ. My oldest and I took Krav Maga for a year. He's like, I want to take a martial art. I was like, hey, me too. Let's do it together. So we both did it together. And part of it was humiliating. I mean, I got my rear end handed to me by the instructor when we were sparring. He's like, did that hurt? I'm like, yeah. But I learned. Was it scary? Yeah, it was. Did you see how fast he was coming at me? Man, this has been awesome, dude. I feel like I could literally talk to you all day. I want to make sure that the men can find everything that you're doing. I just have one quick lightning round question for you. So your wife, you mentioned that she's a professional therapist. And how long you guys been married?
Oh, you just put me on the spot. We've been together 15 years, so we've been
good
married.
Enough.
It'd be 13, I think.
Okay. So. What is one thing that has been a surprising something that you surprisingly appreciate about marriage in general, about her in general, having a relationship with her in general, but just something that maybe before you got married, you're like, I don't really know what this is going to be about. And then over the years, you're like, wow, these are some things that maybe that were kind of unexpected that I truly appreciate and I really cherish.
What I've learned from her, and this is her superpower, is that, and this is just one of the things, this is our relationship, is how important truth is. So truth is not, hey, I think you're being a bitch, or I think you're being a dick. That's not what sharing judgments is not necessarily what we're talking about, just sharing what's going on. And early on in our marriage, I just was under the same programming that most guys have, which is you don't talk about X, Y, Z, this list of things with your woman. You might bring it up with your buddies, maybe. But you hide that stuff from her because A, she can't handle it. She's going to freak out. Just better keep the peace. Well, my wife's got superpower. Like she knows when you're full of shit. She can tell when you're hiding something. And so she'll just be like, what? We're going to stop everything right now. We're going to talk. You're not in trouble. She's not my mom or anything, but it's just like, this is going to erode our trust, which is going to erode our intimacy. It's going to erode everything. And so I've learned over and over and over again that, wow, I can share this with her too. I can share that I'm angry. I can share that I'm disappointed. I can share that I'm actually turned on by other women. I can share that I have a private part of my sex life, which is about me or maybe me in porn or something like that. All of this stuff the places where I would typically have shame are okay with her. And in fact, the more that I share that kind of stuff, that it exists, because she knows it's probably there anyway, but it's just the more that she trusts me and the more relaxed that our relationship is. And it's just way easier for us to feel close and trusting when there's not all this hurt or skeletons that we've got to hide from each other in the way. So I don't see that a lot in other relationships, but I find it to be the most valuable. It's like, wow, what would be possible if you were just willing? It's like, God, could you love me here too? You say you love me, but would you still love me if you knew this about me? And I find that to be just so awe-inspiring. It inspires devotion for me. It's like, I'm with you. You're my gal.
That is true authenticity, man. Like some of the things you mentioned, it's like, I'm sure the guys, as they heard it, they're like, oh, I don't want her to know that.
Yeah.
But the fact that you can be truly authentic, and you mentioned the word shame. I mean, men are very astute to that word. And there are some things that we feel very ashamed, when it comes to not sharing with our wives. And the fact that you guys have that openness, I can definitely see how it makes you close. It's a huge value in your relationship. So good on you for that. I want to make sure all the guys can find everything that you're doing. And gentlemen, like I said, Tripp's book is called This Book Will Make You Dangerous, because most men will allow fear to get the best of them. This book is not for most men, which I love that. I love that tagline. But where can men find your book, maybe connect with you if they want coaching, or where can they just find out more?
The book is on Amazon. No matter what country you're in, you can find it on Amazon. And then if you're interested in my podcast, it's called the New Man Podcast. And then if you're interested in learning more about the coaching that I do, you can find that at tripplanier.com.
Outstanding, man. Dude, this has been so much fun. Again, you're like one of those guys, like I feel like the time flew. I could have talked to you all day long, man. This was super fun.
Thank you, man. I had a blast with you too. I love how present you are. I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Hey guys, for all the show notes, go to gooddadproject.com/286 for this show. You can connect with Tripp. You can grab a copy of his book. We'll have all his social media handles, the whole 9 yards. So don't even worry about that. Again, go to gooddadproject.com/286 for this show. Tripp, thank you so much, man. You are awesome. You are awesome.
Thank you, brother.
You bet. Gentlemen, go out, live with purpose, and live legendary. Take care.